Okay, we're now live.
Okay, before we start, I need to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Please also note that all remote participants are muted at the outset of the meeting and are only able to speak at the invitation of the chair. Please raise your virtual hand if you wish to speak, and then only unmute when the chair invites you to make your contribution. As chair, I may ask that you are muted if you do not participate in this way. So, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for coming on this beautiful morning. Item number 1 is apologies for absence, and we've got Kanya Miles, Rachel Robinson and Tony Parsons, who have apologised. And I think at this juncture it might be helpful if everyone introduced themselves. If you start off, Amanda.
Yes, I'm Amanda Holyoke, the committee officer for today. Claire Braddock, the Overview and Scrutiny officer.
I'm Tom Todd, the Council Scrutiny manager.
I'm Claire Wild from the Severn Valley, and I'm actually chairing the meeting.
James Walton, Executive Director of Resources and the Council Section 151 officer.
Andy Begley, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Whitchurch North.
Rosemary Dartnell, based in Hill Common, Sutton.
Roger Evans, London Division Councillor.
David Menery, Market Drayton West.
Joyce Barrow, St Oswald.
Alistair Rodberg, Gittins, the member for Cheswood.
Tom Biggins, member for Whitchurch North.
Dan Thomas, Montreal.
Okay, thank you. So we don't have any substitutions today, is that right, Rosemary? No, Tony.
That's right, yeah. Councillor Bagman was going to, but her mother is not well.
Okay, and Kate Halliday was the name stuff as well, but she's not just at work. Yeah, okay, fine. So item number 2 is disclosable pecuniary interest. Has anybody got anything they wish to declare? No, okay. Minutes of the previous meeting, held on the 9th of September. Is everyone happy with those? Yep. Quick show of hands. Yep. Everyone happy? Thank you. I don't believe we have any public questions and no member questions. So we're going to move swiftly on to item number 6, which is the collaborative budget. So who's going to introduce that? Is it James or Ben?
I'll do a quick intro.
Yeah, okay, we get James.
I would like to.
So that noise was to say the microphones are now working. Sorry about that. Okay, carry on. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so I'll just do a very brief introduction. The collaborative budget paper. So apologies first to the committee for the collaborative budget paper coming out slightly late, but also the financial strategy paper, which is later, coming out very, very late. Both of those papers are being drawn up kind of at the last minute, trying to get as much information in there as possible. So the collaborative budget paper itself sets out the work that's been done since the end of September, when the collaborative budget group met. Initially, it was proposed to meet fortnightly. That moved very quickly to meeting on a weekly basis. And I think we got into a bit of a rhythm there, whereby information would be provided to the group on one week, and then the following week there'd be the opportunity to question and challenge that further, while we then pre-called the following week's meeting. So we worked that until last week. And at the meeting of the collaborative budget group last week, we took a draft of the paper that you see before us today, which set out all of the work that had been undertaken over that period of time, but also as part of the conclusions to that report, started to set out the areas where we believe there would be savings proposals that would be could be brought forward ahead of public consultation. So the group hopefully has been it's been a helpful and useful piece of work. It's intended that the collaborative budget group will continue to meet into the new year. I can set out more details in relation to the financial position of the authority and the process by which we will be working through consultation and the financial strategy. But I'm proposing to do that as part of the next paper. So at the moment, I just hand it over for questions and discussion around around the collaborative budget process and the findings from that. And the only thing I would ask members to consider is there anything from this particular paper that you wish to feed through into Cabinet, because this paper will also appear on the Cabinet agenda on Wednesday of this week. But I'll hold it there, but happy to take any questions too.
Okay, thank you, James. Have we got any questions? No questions. Okay, in the absence of questions, Gwyneth, I see you're wrapped up for winter there. Have you got anything you'd like to say, or?
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm actually really pleased of how well it's been accepted, the collaborative budgets, and I think it's actually been a very useful process, and I think there's an awful lot of learning to take from it. I think there's going to be a lot of challenges for local government, irrespective of who's in administration next year, and I think we can learn from the process of how we move the authority forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gwyneth. So, we have the paper before us and we have no questions.
That's a first.
No, it is absolutely a first. So
That shows you how well it's been attended and thought of, Chair, in my view.
Thank you, Gwyneth. You've not let us down.
I will have comments on this, but it's better made as the next agenda item, because there is reference in it about, if I can turn to, considering in detail the precious current and potential savings of the capital strategy, the target operating model, resizing and right-sizing the council and the wider public sector financial context. And it's better addressed at the next paper, because I and others have been asking a lot of questions about the detail, but we'll deal with it at the next one, I think.
Okay, so Rosemary, would you like to move the collaborative budget report?
Yes, happy to do so.
Yep, and I will formally second. Can we have a show of hands to make sure everyone's happy? Yep, are you putting your hand up, Roger, or not? Yep, okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. So moving on to item number 7, which is the draft financial strategy. Is James or Ben? James?
I'll introduce this one.
Okay, we get that careful about music now.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so the financial strategy update paper. So this is a delayed paper, as I indicated earlier. This didn't actually get published until Friday, so my apologies for that. There's a number of reasons for that, however, and these were, well, some of those reasons were discussed at the collaborative budget meeting last Monday, but then there were further updates that happened as the week progressed. So the financial strategy is due to be approved by council in February next year. So at this point in time, we would normally provide an update. That update would then go through to Cabinet in December, and that would then form the basis for public consultation. So what you would normally have is a set of proposals that would enable us to deliver a balanced budget from next year. Those proposals would then go out to public consultation. 6 weeks later, feedback from that, alongside what has been in the last couple of years, an alternative budget process would then lead to us producing a paper in early February for Cabinet, and then that's producing the final financial strategy that would go to Council at the end of February for approval from the 1st of April 2025. This particular year, we produced an update that went to Cabinet in July on the financial strategy, and then a further update that went to Cabinet on the 16th of October. What we found with the new government coming in, there were a number of unknowns and uncertainties around what the budget would look like, and in terms of the funding that Shropshire Council would receive. The budget that was released on the 30th of September gave some indications that everyone would be aware of some of the things that could impact on local government, including things like national insurance, contributions, employers' contributions and national living wage, but then some alterations in relation to the way in which the The funding mechanism may were some guarantees around increases in local government funding through the core spending power, some changes in relation to social care funding. A number of these are set out in the report, just to give an idea of the indications that were given as at the end of October. Over the intervening weeks, it then became clear that there was considerable amount of uncertainty around what those would actually mean, what guarantees around additional funding into local government would mean. There was a change in formula that was being proposed, and it was unknown what the implications of that would be for individual authorities. So it was due towards the end of November, but a policy statement was finally released on the 28th of November. Which was Thursday of last week. So it was decided to hold the financial strategy while we looked to see what the implications of the policy statement were, and that necessitated a report going out on Friday afternoon. So the policy statement implications are set out in paragraph 7.6 in the report, and these give a little bit more detail about some of the changes that we would expect to see as part of the settlement. Settlement due out the week before Christmas. So just going through those lines in section 7.6, just briefly, we were expecting a multi-year settlement for 25-26 and 26-27. However, it's now only a one-year settlement for 25-26, and then in the following year, there will be a multi-year settlement. My view on that is that that means that there is the potential to change the funding methodology quite considerably in 26-27. And if a two-year settlement was given now, it would tie the government into that 5-6 and 6-7 position. So by only giving a one-year settlement in 5-6, it does suggest that 6-7 could be quite radically different. The referendum principles were agreed as per previously. So this means a 3% basic increase in council taxes allowed, and a 2% increase in the adult social care precept, so 5% in total. And just to confirm, the assumptions around the financial strategy is that a 5% increase in council tax would be taken from the 1st of April 2025. The other areas that are shown within the bullet points are around the additional funding that will come through adult social care and a new recovery grant, so an additional £1.3 billion nationally. It will be distributed on different and new formulas, so we're waiting to see what those would look like, and it's very unclear at the moment what that would mean for a rural authority like Shropshire. The Rural Services Delivery Grant, which was introduced several years ago, and at the moment is worth £8 million to Shropshire Council every year, will be scrapped, and that funding will be repurposed. There is a statement that says authorities with a significant rural population will receive around a 5% increase in their core spending power next year. Of course, core spending power includes council tax, and it's just been confirmed that council tax increase is assumed at 5%. So that doesn't actually guarantee anything in my mind. The minimum funding guarantee, which was sat at 4% previously, which meant that every authority, after all of the calculations have been done, their baseline will be 4% higher than the previous year, has been scrapped. So what that means is that although there is a guaranteed uplift in core spending power, we already know that the 5% council tax and precept increase would give an uplift in core spending power. There is no guarantee at what percentage that will look like overall. So in theory, it could be a 0.1% increase overall, including the 5% council tax increase. The other grants that will be taken out, when those grants are taken out, they will then be redistributed under a different formula. We don't know what that formula would look like, but the understanding is that formula will be based on deprivation, and as such, it is unlikely that Shropshire Council as a rural authority will benefit from that particular distribution methodology. But we don't know. Until we see what that looks like, we simply do not know. So from that point of view, we've changed the financial strategy. So rather than talking about our assumed funding gap, so in October, we talked about a funding gap of £37 million. If you think about the funding gap from basic principles, we're talking about the difference between the projected expenditure and the projected funding. Although we can pretty much guarantee the level of funding that we receive through council tax and perhaps business rates. What we can't guarantee is the funding that's coming through from the government, which makes up the balance. We can also pretty much guarantee what our expenditure will look like to a degree. So what we've looked at is, based on that £37 million gap that we identified in October, what was the level of expenditure that we were expecting, based on those figures in October? What can we do to mitigate that expenditure down? And what can we do in terms of identifying savings to bring that expenditure down? What we can't do is then say, what does that mean in terms of the gap? Because that would require us to know what the funding looks like, and we don't know what the funding looks like until after we've received the settlement, week commencing 16th of December. So on the back of that, the mitigations have been identified and built into the report, and those are shown at the top of page 10, just under paragraph 7.15. So we show the changes in expenditure that were brought about by the 16th of October, the mitigations around £17 million that have been identified across adults and children's predominantly. And then there was a figure of £8.5 million, which is the proposed savings that we believe can be put forward. Those themes around where those savings will sit are set out into paragraph 7.12. And the plan is that we will then pull together a more detailed public consultation around that £8.5 million worth of savings. We will work with the collaborative budget group meeting to ensure that there is enough clarity around what that consultation would look like. And then we plan to launch that sometime around about the week beginning 9th of December. So hopefully sometime next week will be the plan. And that would enable us then to get 6 weeks consultation in before we get to the February round of Cabinet and Council meetings where we set the budget. So that's the position as it stands at the moment. Hopefully that clarifies the main issues, but as always, happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, so Rob Gittins, Councillor Rob Gittins, you've got a question.
Yes, I just got a question around section 7.2 of the report on page 6. We've highlighted the Chancellor's budget. How do the additional costs, especially the increase in the employers' national insurance, affect third parties, especially in social care? Has the council undertaken any financial modelling on these extra costs, and what does that look like for the future?
The future. So there's two parts to the changes around the national living wage and the national insurance contributions. One is the direct impact on the council, which will be the employees of the council, and the second one is where you're coming from, which is in relation to the impact on the supply chain and how those costs will be brought forward through and into the council. So initially, to be clear, the position that was set out by the Chancellor was that there would be a form of protection for the public sector, and that meant the direct costs of national insurance contributions. So the direct costs should be compensated for in some way. However, where there are wholly owned companies that run social care, for example, or where there are, as in the case of Shropshire, where there are external companies that provide that social care work, that will not be compensated for by the government. So we are working through the modelling for that. We have produced models in relation to the implications for demand and for uplifts in the market charges for third-party spend across the board. We're having to revisit those and ensure that they are accurate given the implications of this. What we don't have is the opportunity to say that those costs therefore will be passed on to the local authority because we don't have the money to deal with that. So there will have to be some form of discussion and negotiation to find a way of absorbing that cost in the way in which we manage. So what we don't have is a calculation that says this will cost X million pounds more and therefore we've got to deal with it. What we're doing is we're working through the implications of that with the providers around the county to find a way of mitigating that as far as we possibly can. So I can't give you a straight answer. I can only tell you the process that we're working through.
Okay, thank you. Have you got follow up or
No,
No?
thank you.
so Roger and then Rosemary?
Thank you, Chairman. This is a scrutiny meeting, and I'm approaching it as a scrutiny member, not a member of any other working group or committee. I'm looking at the information which is in the public domain and available to the other members around the table, and I'm disappointed in it. The Q2 results are not here this morning. Neither is the auditor's report that went to the audit committee on Friday, Thursday, which talks about the financial sustainability and the North West Relief Road. None of that is mentioned in any of these papers at all. Neither is the actual reference really to all the financial savings that were agreed by a majority of the council in February, which if they are down there again as they are, I would not agree with, because they are just lines on a piece of paper, as are the mitigations which was referred to a few minutes ago. I don't know what they are. As a councillor, I want to know what they are. And if one looks at the financial strategy, which is before it today, in 2.2, it says, and the steps to get there require a robust budget process, an understanding of projected expenditure, income and other resources, public consultation on proposals, and ultimately council approval in February. I can't see any of that here today at a scrutiny committee, which we're saying that can go out to it. And if one looks at the Grant Thornton's financial report that went to Thursday's audit committee, it does say there is significant weakness in the council's arrangements for financial sustainability as evidenced in the 21-22 and 22-23 value for money report, which were presented to the audit committee in July 24, where we highlighted that the significant risks the council faces in respect of its financial sustainability, consistent overspends over the past 3 financial years of 2 million, 8.5 million and 7.9 million have put the council on the brink in terms of financial sustainability, and they say precarious, though not catastrophic. And that is repeated several times, and that's the whole theme. They do make comments as well about the way the council has handled the North West Relief Road, and made various comments there about the failures that this council has displayed. Although there's more information in that report than has ever been disclosed to any member. But I am disappointed, as I say, there are millions here, and it's referenced there by the Section 151 officer about the mitigations that have been taken place. I have no idea what they are. I don't know what the mitigations are for next year that would do it. I looked at the report, and as he says, the July one showed expenditure of 766.51 million. The October one showed an expenditure of 790.27 million pound. July 17.7 gap. October 37.3 million pound gap. Here it says that gap has been much reduced. How? Does not say. The collaborative budget, where I have it, and I will refer briefly to that, I don't know how that is being gained. It is all secret from us members who are setting the policy, who're supposed to be discussing the budget, and it's supposed to be going out for a consultation on December the 9th or something like this. There's no meetings of any other group except the cabinet between now and then. So I presume the cabinet will be agreeing it. What the detail will be involved, I just do not know. I can talk more, Chairman, but I will say that I am disappointed that the information has been supplied on the mitigations. I have made reference in various other places, both at full council last February when the budget was discussed about the lines that were there. There have been more information this year, but it is still insufficient. When I look at some of it details its savings of £3 million. and it's just one line. As a councillor, I would like to know what that involves. What are we signing up for? Because at present, I do not know. And it took some putting together the actual resources that we've got both July and October, because I understand the difficulty getting the resources that will be available for next year because of the new government, and it may not be known until later in December. But what are we going to be consulted on? They could be generous. They could, the consultation may be completely different because of it. And I understand those difficulties, but when I see in this report here that there are mitigations of £20 million and £8 million there, I have difficulty, and I'm not sure whether I would want to be part of this discussion unless more information is given out. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, so I'll just say a few words, and I think I'm going to get possibly Gwyneth to come in after me. So we did look at a lot of this at the budget process. What we agreed there was that some of the lines on the medium-term financial strategy probably needed a little bit of better dialogue. There are no secrets anywhere, and I don't think it's helpful for you to say things like that in the public domain. And I'm going to pass you over to Gwyneth now, see if he's got any more to add on that.
Yeah, there's a few things. I think, again, it all comes down to the trust of officers. My first comment is, Roger, I don't think I've ever seen the results of an audit committee coming to this scrutiny meeting, because that's the whole point of the audit committee. So actually repeating it here really is a I don't see why it's been brought up again. Secondly, as we've repeated going through the year, the robustness of the figures as we get further through the year become more and more stronger. We can actually trust them. Now, the officers, when they put through what savings are required in Q1 and then Q2, is the proposed business plan. It's the assumption. But when they get to work through those figures, they often do change. They can go up, they can go down. And that's what we've seen there. If you as a councillor believe it is your role to actually understand all the day-to-day's working of the officers, I don't think that is our job. Our job is to set the policy. So, and I think, you know, we cannot go through every single line in immaculate detail. There has to be a level of trust with this moving forward. And we have no further information than you have. It's just we perhaps have a different level of trust in the officers. Thank you.
Okay.
If I can, Chairman, I do trust the officers, and the officers are coming forward, but I have a responsibility. This council is member-led, I am told. So the officers have a responsibility to bring to members the repercussions of all the savings that they are proposing, and the members do it. There are some savings which are in the collaborative budget that I've seen I would not support. And others have also said that from other political parties. So there needs to be trust, yes, and I do trust their figures, but I need to know what they are and what they would mean, not in intricate, but in policy terms. And that's where I'm coming from, and I've always come from. And that is not what we are getting, or I am not getting.
Okay, so that's not exactly the conversation that happened at the collaborative budget process. I'm going to pass over to Gwyneth, you come back and then I'll get James in.
Yeah, I don't know how many times we've actually said this, Chair. If there are any changes to policy, they have to come through the normal process of Cabinet, where we have the open debate and we move things forwards. But the day-to-day running of this council has to be left to the officers. Furthermore, well, I'll leave it at that for the time being, Chair. I'll let you get on.
Okay. Thank you, Gwyneth. James, would you like to say anything now?
Yeah.
So if I can, Chair, thank you. Okay, so just to confirm a few points that were raised there. So starting with the audit committee paper, that paper was a public report that went to the audit committee as part of Grant Thornton's external auditors audit findings report. Sorry, annual report it's now called. we would never ever take an annual audit report through to a scrutiny committee on the basis that it is an audit report that goes to the audit committee, and those charged with governance are the committee members on the audit committee. That, as I say, is a public report. Every member has, well, everybody on Earth has accessibility to that particular report. So from that point of view, there is no reason to then identify that within this meeting. I would also point out, though, that I would be very surprised if any member of this authority didn't believe that the council's financial position was precarious. I don't think there's anything in that report that was highlighted that anybody didn't know. And if they didn't know that, then I'm not doing my job very well, because we are in a difficult financial position. We've made no bones about that. And therefore, that is the reason why we brought the financial strategy report along in the way that we have. In terms of the mitigations, so I'll go over that one again because it is important that this point is understood. So there is £16.729 million worth of mitigations that are identified within the report. So on the face of it, you could ask the question, what are those £16.729 million of mitigations? And I accept that as a question that could be asked. However, we need to take a step backwards from that and remember what was taken to Cabinet on the 16th of October. On the 16th of October, we identified and we said very clearly, based on some very basic arithmetic figures, we have identified growth of £37.3 million. So what that said was very simply was things like, we know there is an overspend in the children's services budget at the moment. If you let that overspend continue into next year, and if you assume it continues to grow at that rate, that would add another £14-15 million into the budget. So it was a very simple, basic arithmetic calculation that said, based on the information that we have at the moment, it gives a gap of 37. However, work is being done to identify what that modelling would demonstrate should be the figure in terms of the growth. So the £16.729 million mitigation here is not, we don't need to explain what that mitigation is. What we have is the growth that's going into next year, which is the calculation. So if we keep it really simple, we might have said it was £10 million. We've done a piece of work here that says actually the figure is £3 million. It's the £3 million that's important, not the £7 million that was wrong. So the 16.7 is the wrong figure that's been taken down. What we've now got is growth that's going into children's adults and highways and other areas of the authority as shown here. So all the 16.7 is doing is saying that was the bit that was wrong in the last figure. I can't explain what that is because it's just the wrong figure. What matters is the correct figure that goes in terms of growth. In terms of the savings proposals that have been identified, we've got £8.462 million. There was more detail provided, and all the members of the collaborative budget group know this, more details provided on what those savings would mean to the collaborative budget group. However, the group decided that was information that some people would support, some people would not support, some people would feel needed more detailed public consultation, some felt that it was perfectly all right. What we decided to do, agreed with the collaborative budget group, was that we would just give the highlights in terms of what that information was, and what we would then do is we would work to pull together a more detailed public consultation document. At the moment, there is no collaborative budget meeting due to be held between now and the week commencing the 9th of December, when the public consultation is due to start. What we are looking to do is to try and get a meeting in either on Friday or Monday. Monday morning would probably be the best because we've had a meeting every Monday morning for the collaborative budget meeting, where we can then take more detailed information to that group so that hopefully we can sign that off. But just to be clear, we are going out. The plan here was that the collaborative group as a whole would agree to a set of proposals to go out to public consultation. There is no indication, no expectation that any member of that collaborative budget group meeting was in agreement with any of those particular savings. The proposals were they would go out to the public. The public would then have their say on those particular proposals. Some of those, again, it was openly mentioned, some of the proposals that were on the table, the administration group was saying they probably wouldn't support. So I think it's very clear that there was that these were
just proposals that were being put forward that we could discuss and clarify. At the end of that process, we would then have a much better idea of what the public is willing to agree to or not to agree to. The reason we don't have a gap, and again, just a point that was raised earlier, we don't know the gap is being reduced and we don't know how. The gap is not being reduced because I go back to the point I made earlier. We don't know what the settlement looks like yet, so we can't calculate the gap yet. All I've done is demonstrated that the expenditure that was proposed has now gone down. The gap might be bigger. The gap might have disappeared. We simply do not know, and we will not know until we get the draft settlement week commencing 16th of October. So what do we do in the meantime? We don't know what the gap looks like. We don't know how much money we're going to get from government. All we can do is go out to public consultation on a set of proposals which may or may not go forward, which may or may not be sufficient. There may be too much, there may not be enough. We go out on those, we ask the public what they think of them. Regardless of what they think of them, we will have consulted on them, which enables us then to put in place those proposals based on the result of that consultation. People say they don't like it, doesn't mean we don't do it. If people say as part of that consultation, it would be unlawful or really inappropriate or whatever it might be on the back of that, that will give us a steer in relation to implementing those. And again, just to reiterate, if any of those savings require a policy change, which is not sufficiently covered by the public consultation undertaken, they would have to go back to Cabinet or to Council as necessary to agree that policy change that would enable that particular savings proposal to be enacted. So nothing is being decided, nothing is being agreed, and just to be clear, from an officer point of view, I am not holding any secrets back. I'm giving all of the information I can to the collaborative budget group. I'm giving all that information as I can into the financial strategy report, which is coming here today, and it's going to exactly the same cabinet, exactly the same report is going to cabinet on Wednesday. So I'm hopefully trying to provide as much information as I can, but there is a limit to what information we can actually pull together based on what we have at the moment.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for your patience, Rosemary. I'm just conscious Ben's got his hand up and I think he wants to answer in part Roger's question. Ben, would you like to say something now?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And yeah, in supporting James's articulation there of what the current position is and some of the difficulties around it, I think just to address directly, Councillor Evans, if I may, just a couple of points raised. And I completely understand some of the concerns that are raised, exactly as James was saying. Is this are fundamental policy type decisions embedded in this MTFS or not? They are not. And just to illustrate perhaps exactly what that means, paragraph 7.9 of the report talks about the basic rates of increase in different areas. So if you look at paragraph 7.9, the second sentence there, the estimated growth into future years, the second sentence says this is done by considering the basic rate of increase that's expected, which is often a largely arithmetical process, and then overlaying values relating to the mitigations. If the committee turns to the table which has been referred to, which follows paragraph 7.15, what you can see there is a number of different areas, and I think it's probably just worth picking up on some of these and how they work and what they mean, trying to expand on that for greater clarity and hopefully greater understanding for the committee. So the increased inflationary growth, you can see there, that's to do with pay and contract price increases, for example. We don't have a crystal ball. I know people like myself and James were fond of saying that. We don't have a crystal ball. We cannot know in advance what some of those things are. There's also a lot of sensitivity in terms of contract price. How much do you want to disclose and put into the public arena? There's also an awful lot of difference between the different areas that we're talking about. Adults' price increases can vary from anything between 6% up to more than 20%, depending on the cohort that you're looking at. It is quite a complex process. It's not to do with the care that individuals receive. It's not to do with the care packages. It's to do with statistics and arithmetic. Similarly, the growth demand for children's social care, which is that second line there, again, this is very much to do with arithmetic. And one of the issues there is if you take a 12-month baseline of activity and extrapolate that and go forward, you get different results. If you go June to June, you get something like plus 15%. If you go January to January, you get something like plus 10%. And that's before we've talked to the service and considered what might the longer term implications be of interventions such as stepping stones. So this is to do with the way in which the estimates are brought together. It's to do with statistics, it's to do with arithmetic. It's absolutely not with some sort of hidden policy agenda. That is absolutely not the case at all. And I do want to emphasise that point. I know that that's what James was exactly what James was just saying, but I think it's really important to understand, for the committee to understand, that those growth mitigations, that's the best language we could come up with to explain how some shift in the statistical and arithmetical approaches that we were taking has led to some of these changes. And it is that simple. And there isn't anything in there about adding to services, taking services away, limiting care packages or anything like that. That isn't something that we could put in and hide in a paper like that, and we wouldn't want to. So for clarity, and I hope that it explains what's happening within this, and it is a difficult one. It's not about the policy. It's not about the allocation of care packages. This isn't about a change to the way that social services is being administered within or managed within the council. This is to do with the arithmetic of trying to understand what price changes might look like into next year and what activity changes might look like next year. I hope that clarifies, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Ben. So I think we've had a very comprehensive response. So I'm going to now ask Rosemary.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to underline Roger's comments regarding the lack on today's agenda of the repercussions of the serious mega project governance issues raised in the external auditors report. This is in the public domain, and it identifies a level of risk that should be debated carefully and widely acknowledged. We should also be scrutinising the second quarter position and projected year-end position as it currently stands. That's just going to be a question so much. I've got a couple of questions though. Is it correct that the timing of government local authority settlement has followed the same timetable for many years? I note we're promised multi-year funding from 26 to 27, which will be helpful to Shropshire Council and for our communities going forward from that date. How long have single-year settlements been normal government policy? And it's good to see that the government has committed to increase both public transport funding and the potholes and roads block funding, which I think we desperately need here in Shropshire particularly. While it's obvious what pothole and roads block funding is intended to cover, can you define, based on our current policies, what public transport would cover and what it would fund?
Okay. Very interesting questions there. I think we have had single year settlements, much to our dismay, for quite a while. Anyway, I'll let James answer all those questions for you, Rosemary.
Thank you. So, in terms of the again, governance issues were raised as part of the audit committee. Governance issues are discussed at audit committee. The Scrutiny committee is here to discuss overall performance and the outcomes of that, not particularly governance issues. If we do, we'll be doubling up. I would suggest that we should maintain that differential, ensuring that governance issues are picked up at the right committee. In terms of quarter two, the quarter two report was taken to 16th of October. That was brought forward. The general consensus, the way in which the scrutiny has worked this year, is that we've been taking the finance reports through to scrutiny before they go to cabinet. There wasn't the opportunity to take the quarter two through to scrutiny ahead of that. So the proposal would be that we take the following reports. There is no reason why that couldn't have been added to the agenda. Somebody had requested that. And the period 7 is not yet finalised, so that wouldn't have been available for today either. I think it was always understood that when we get to this point in the year, the focus tends to be on the budget for next year rather than the interim period. But as I say, the quarter two is out there. It's a public report. Happy to take any questions if the chair is willing to indulge on that particular one. So the timetable of events, yeah, absolutely happy with the way in which that's worked. The settlement is always coming out in December. That has been the case. Sometimes it's been very, very late in the year, literally, a couple of days before Christmas Day, which makes it very difficult. That is to do with the Treasury and the Government Office. It's not to do with any the political overlay of that. That said, we are looking this year at a very different settlement. What we have, and again, just to be absolutely clear, government funding through the settlement has been established under a certain on a certain basis for a number of years now. It's been very unfortunate that we've had single year settlements. It's much better to get multi-year settlements. However, when we have a single year settlement and we know the basic mechanics of the way in which that's going to work, that makes it much easier to plan. Whether or not I agree with the way in which those have been put together, nevertheless, if there is a consistency, what kind of effect you can work through that. So in the past, for example, we have said Royal Service Delivery Grant, we will just assume that at the same level. Where we've talked about Improved Better Care Fund, we've been able to assume that. A few years back, we were assuming that they were one-off grants, is what they said. We moved to, let's assume those are going to continue. So we're in a position where every year we're assuming those grants are going to continue. Going into this year, we assumed that a number of those were going to continue. What we found out on Thursday was that some of those grants are not going to continue. That is very, very different to any settlements we've had in previous years. So from that point of view, yes, it's the same timetable, but the underlying information is very, very different. And I do not feel confident at all that I could take a paper this side of the settlement that would explain what funding we're going to get from government. I simply cannot estimate that. So the fact that the multi-year settlement has not been provided, I understand the point that's being made. It's been single years for several years. However, had we had a multi-year settlement this year, not only would we have had an understanding of what on earth this new funding will look like for Shropshire, but we'd have had an indication we could plan for next year as to what that would look like, even if it was really, really bad. What we now are finding is that this year could be really, really good, could be really, really bad. And what we don't know is what on earth that will mean for next year. So we're going to be at exactly this point next year, which is really, really unhelpful. In terms of the additional funding that's been provided in the areas, yes, there is additional pothole funding, there is additional funding into children's social care, there is additional funding into adult social care. We cannot work out what that means because we do not know whether this is additional funding or whether there'll be some compensatory impact somewhere else, which will just mean that we'll be losing funding somewhere else. We can't even estimate what the bottom line is. We don't know whether there'll be terms and conditions attached to this funding, which will require increased productivity, which will require certain hoops to be jumped through, just to say. We can't estimate that. So at the moment, we are blind in terms of what that means. The original estimate, if you take the existing funding and say overall funding for local government is going to go up by 3.2%, you could estimate that for Shropshire, and 3.2% increase for Shropshire would be perhaps a £10 million increase. So we could say that. I think I would be misleading this authority if I put in this report that we're going to get £10 million additional funding through this settlement. I absolutely have no idea how that's going to work out. That's why we are where we are.
Okay, and yeah, of course you can. Ben, just did you want to come back on that point, or Rosemary's got another? Do you want to take the next question then, or?
I'm quite happy to take the next question. There was a couple of points around what James was saying, but I'm happy for Rosemary to go first. Absolutely.
Okay, if you go first.
Thank you. Yeah, I did ask. Could you define what public transport funding would cover?
Do you want to go, Ben?
Okay, we'll let James do that, and then we'll go over.
I think, yeah, I'll do the tag thing, James. I think that's what we're doing in this meeting, and I hope that's okay with members. Just very simply, in terms of what the public transport funding means, we do sort of know what that relates to, because some of it is to do with the subsidy that's provided to local bus companies to provide particularly public bus transport arrangements in rural areas in particular. There's also work that's come through with some of the announcements around the way that the cost to the user, the passenger, is to be minimised, damped, funded, to not pass on some of those. So we know that that's to do with the way that those bus services are being provided and funded. However, and this kind of links back to some of the points that were in the back of my mind as James was making a response just now. The committee should be aware that we're still waiting for the devolution white paper. We understand from the local government minister that the devolution white paper is imminent, and it will extend all the way from the mayoral combined authorities, which you will know a lot about, all the way down to the town and parish councils, of which there are a great many in the Shropshire area. And we don't know what's in there yet. So we do know something, Rosemary, to your point, we do know something about what the funding impacts around public transport might be, but we don't know whether the responsibilities around public transport could be changed. So, for example, Transport for London, huge enterprise, that's part of the mayoral responsibility in London. Something similar we know is in Manchester. Quite what might happen across some of those devolution points, we don't yet know. So there's an added layer of complication to what James was just explaining. A couple of bits also worth picking up. What we've seen over the last, I think, 5 or 6 years has been single year settlements with effectively a rollover of the principles from one year to the next. That's what James is referring back to. That's why it's actually been relatively simple and relatively stable. It's unhelpful that it's single year, but we haven't really seen any fundamental change. The last time we saw fundamental change in the funding of local government was in 2013-14 and the implementation of the rates retention scheme. Absolutely fundamental change, very complicated, difficult to implement, difficult to understand, and people like myself, and I'm sure James as well, often quite difficult to explain in an easy way for councillors to understand exactly what's happening. So it's a very complicated piece. We haven't seen potential change to the local government funding system on this scale for a decade. That's why it's very difficult to call how it's working through. What we do know, however, and there's some of the detailed work from the technical support team and the Society for County Treasurers, some of their responses indicated that there's a quite clear shift in the language and in terms of the national policy away from funding going into more rural areas, such as the Rural Services Delivery Grant, and towards a higher level of funding going into more urban areas and being linked to deprivation. Not a particular surprise, but again, there are now so many moving parts which could impact on the gap position. And I understand completely James's logic on this, and I completely support it. To give any sense to councillors as to what the current gap position is for next year, it is likely to be misleading because we just don't know, and we won't know probably until the 18th or 19th of December. And then I'm quite sure that many of you will wish to get an update as quickly as possible. So we're preparing the ground so that we can provide an update just as fast as we can. But it's going to be really complicated. I hope that clarifies a little. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ben. Are you happy with that?
I'm happy, thank you.
Yeah. So Roger had his hand up again, I think. Did you, Roger?
Yes, Chairman, I do have a question, but I'll make a comment first about the audit committee. The audit committee just look at figures. They do not look at policies or anything like this. At the audit committee, I asked for officers to come back to the next meeting of the audit committee in December, and it was voted down by the majority of the councillors there. It was 3-2. I then proposed, and it was then proposed that the report for the Grant Thornton just be noted. I objected to that and said I wanted it noted with concern at the very least. And again, that was in the end voted through, 3 votes for and 2 against. So the view of members of that committee is that they do not get involved in policy, they accept it and they look at it, and they make great play that they do that, and Scrutiny also does the policies and look behind it, which is where I think we should be looking at financial sustainability. The Grant Thornton have raised great questions about that and the way this council manages it and the way that it does it. It's overspent every year. And it says that when you do a budget, it should be a realistic budget that you know that you will make. There are savings for this year, which it is said are now undeliverable. There is a carryover at present of £35 million into next year of savings that cannot be made this year. It may be different now because on page 9 of this report, it says in October, this was updated and set out in 7.9 in grew. Work completed by December has more than offset that growth through mitigations of £16.7 million and savings proposals of £8.4 million. What I'm asking for, what is that 16.7? What does that involve? And the savings proposals of 8.4 million. What are those proposals? Just to say that that is there, and therefore it is being brought down. Congratulating to officers, but I would like to know what they are. If one looks at the report which went to the February Council, I'm picking out some for 25-26. Improve efficiencies of commissioned services across children's services, contracts, and secure overall reductions in demand for £1.6 million for this year. I assume they've done it. And then it says, review potential reduction of some leisure provision to achieve cost reductions, 354,000. Review library services to ensure maximum efficiencies, £220,000. And then if one turns over the pages, one will see, for example, references about highways and also rationalise property and buildings to secure revenue savings, e.g. utilities, security, repairs, maintenance, etc. Use reductions to assure capital receipts of £3 million. All those are in, and that's all it says in this. So I just want to know what this actually means. And there are other savings which I could also highlight. Nighttime care and support services enabling people to stay at home, saving £520,000. And if one looks at the tables that are provided for us today, and if you look at the table, which is on page 7 of the report, there are figures there which have never appeared and did not appear in the October one. For example, ASC, Market Sustainability and Improvement Fund, 6.1 million. Is that a one-off? Discharge Fund, 2.77 million. New Homes Bonus, 1.81 million. Services Grant, lower tier, 0.36 million. No information. They just appeared in the core spending power, which was not mentioned in the October financial strategy that was there. So it's just those sort of figures, I think, as a scrutiny committee, we should be aware of what that actually means.
Okay, before James goes on, if you, I presume you read the papers, Roger, you know, the savings to the leisure services, I presume a fair chunk of that is for Much Wenlock with Brooks, which is, I think, going to Cabinet. There's another about the efficiency of the buildings. We're moving to the Guildhall. I think the thing is, we're moving at quite a pace. And we're not hiding anything. Most of those things there are quite apparent.
One last comment, if I can, Chairman. On today's paper, it says on page 3, number 6, risks arising from projects. And then it says 25-26 outlook, no direct impacts are currently anticipated in the coming year, although the planned investment in several schemes will remain under review. No risks. There is a risk. The government could do it. It may be 40-60 or 60-40, 70-30 or 30-70. There is a risk, but it opens up no direct impacts. If the North West Creek Road is cancelled, does not go ahead, there's no reference here, there's no risk identified to the audit committee, which identifies what happens. The auditors pick up that there's £30 million there, which could put this council at risk. They identify it, but nowhere in these papers, is it?
Well, we certainly discussed the audit committee a lot. I just wonder if I'm in the right meeting. Right, okay, James, is there anything?
If you'd come to that meeting, Chairman, as a chairman of this, you would have seen what it was, because there is a whole 5 pages on financial sustainability that is in it.
Yeah, I have sat on it, I
know,
think, 3
I know.
times this year. Right, okay, James, is there anything you'd like to add? And perhaps, Ben, James, you're very keen today. James and then Ben, yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
Sorry. So just trying to support the work of the committee as best I can, Chair. That's all. But I think just to meet with Roger's points there, the points around core spending power and the inclusion of the table in the report, to some extent, has arisen because core spending power is something that government is talking about. So it seems helpful to make sure that members are clear and cited on what the current position around core spending power is. There was a question, Roger, that you raised, I think, in one of the later collaborative budget working group meetings, where you were asking for some greater clarity around core spending power, which was also part of the reason for including the table. So that, I hope, sort of clarifies in terms of whether things were included in the October version and update of the MTFS or not. There is a link in the bottom of the paper, in the bottom of the paper, I think it's at the bottom of page 9, a link to the February MTFS, and on page 21 of the February MTFS, there is a clear statement there which includes those values which you just read out, Roger. So I understand that there's maybe some bits where it doesn't seem to link back in quite the way that you might expect. As the chair just noted, it is moving very quickly. It is all there, and I hope I can demonstrate for you that that is the case. So there isn't anything being concealed, and actually what we're trying to do is make it as transparent as possible. That was all I wanted to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ben. Have you got anything to add, James?
Really just to reiterate, so yeah, just to be clear, the core spending power paper, sorry, the table that is in the paper is for the current financial year, it's 24-25, it has no implications for next year. It was purely just to try and identify the makeup of the current figures, which were agreed by council in February last year. So there's no new information in that. It purely is the current financial year. It's in that figure that if you then apply 3.2% uplift to, that you get an extra £10 million on that basis. But as I say, I don't think that's appropriate to do that. In terms of the, again, as has been pointed out, a number of the proposals that were put forward in February for the 25-26 financial year were then taken out as part of the 16th of October. So if you look at the February 24 paper, it does indeed talk about an additional £3 million worth of asset rationalisation. If you look at October 16th paper, it then talks about reductions in those savings being taken out. It's part of the reason why the figure initially grew. So some of those are being taken out, the leisure centres, etc. All of those are being reconsidered as part of the overall position. So it was an assessment of what 25-26 would look like based on last year. All of that was revised as part of the October paper, and we will end up with a final position, which we will then go out to consult on as necessary this year. In terms of the risks for next year, as it stands at the moment, we do not have sufficient information that would enable us to quantify risks into next year. Yes, absolutely, there is all sorts of speculation that we could pull together, but in terms of identifying a clear risk for this authority in relation to the key projects that we've taken forward, until there is a material change in the direction of travel, then we can't estimate, so we won't build those in as identified risks at this point in time. I think that covers off all of the areas, but if I've missed anything, let me know.
Okay, so from the chair, I'm going to propose that we actually note the report. Is everyone happy? Can I have a second, please? Joyce, second. All those in favour?
And if you noted, I abstain.
Yes, absolutely. Did you abstain as well, Rosemary? Yeah, okay, so Rosemary and Roger abstain. Okay, thank you very much. So we now move on to item number 8, which is the work programme. Before we discuss that, I just want to say to members that the next meeting is meant to be the 13th of January, but it's been suggested that we move it to the 20th of January, because then we'll be able to see the papers that go to Cabinet on, is it the 22nd? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that to me seems very sensible. Is everyone happy about that? Otherwise, the papers won't be done in time.
Makes sense.
Okay?
So Claire, you're suggesting the 20th?
Yes.
We do have that in as a collaborative budget discussion as well.
Yeah. Okay. So we can alter it. So we do this meeting after the collaborative budget, if you like. It makes more sense
Yeah, I know.
to actually, have the papers. Otherwise, we're going to be guessing again. So I just wanted to raise that before we'll go back now to the work programme. Tom.
Yeah, thank you. So in reality, we're sort of running in towards the end of the year, quite literally. So you've got the upcoming meeting in January, which we just discussed, moving to the 20th.
Yeah.
And then potentially a later meeting, but that might actually sort of overlap with the pre-election period for the local government elections next year. I think the plan is always that come the January meeting, you normally will take the budget paper or the financial strategy paper. At the moment, your work programme for that meeting, unless there are other things which come up, would just be that financial strategy paper that you've just been discussing. And I think that will probably fill the meeting.
Yeah, I think we just ought to leave it having the budget at the next meeting. Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. Where does this leave the Q3 financial strategy Q3 report?
James.
Chair, so the Q3, as at the end of December, would not be produced until February. So it takes a month to work our way through. So there's no chance on that the scrutiny or cabinet in January will be able to see the Q3. However, the period 7 and or period 8, we'll have a look and see what the timetable is around those. As I said, the plan would be that wherever scrutiny falls, the latest information that's available can be discussed at those meetings if you want to add that onto the agenda. Yeah. So I can confirm whether period 7 or period 8 will be available by then. Period 7 will be, definitely. I don't know whether period 8 will be, depending on because with Christmas break out, we don't have the whole of December to produce the end of November position. So it might be very tight on period 8, but we can certainly take some.
Yeah, so I think with those 2 items, I think that's absolutely enough for January. Is everyone content on that? Hold on, Roger.
Sorry, Chairman. So when you say the items, are you talking about the periods, having those reports if and when they're available?
Yes.
Those on the agenda?
Yeah. That makes sense, because we won't have Q3, but we can have 7. James will ensure we have the latest financial data and also the budget report. And I think that's probably the best thing to do. Is everyone content with that? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much indeed. So I will see you all at full council, but our next meeting is the 20th. Okay, so perhaps you can tell Tony as well. Thank you very much indeed.